This is the bit where we look awkwardly at the camera and smile until we know we're live, and we are live. Klaus Lauter, welcome to the show, man. Good to see you.
Thanks
How
for
are you
having
doing?
me. Pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Where are you? Where are you coming to us from in the world today?
I'm in Cyprus.
Excellent. Sunny Cyprus. The classic place to be for internet marketers, in fact, isn't it? I remember quite a few British guys were obsessed with living in Cyprus and running online businesses 10, 15 years ago now. Are the
It's,
Brits still out there, or are they sort of mostly left now?
well, there is a few Brits here. I think they will be soon back on the island once the borders open for them. But you're quite right. There is a huge e-commerce digital market economy here, actually. I mean, I was surprised when I came here how much digital things are going on here. So yeah, definitely a spot for e-commerce entrepreneurs and related.
Yeah, there are certain kind of hotspots, aren't there? I mean, I guess the weather's famously lovely, and Bali is the other one that seems to be full of Americans. Quite a few people that I know, very serious sellers or agency owners, seem to be out there. So I guess the digital nomad thing is not dead as an idea, but I guess nomad's not the right idea under COVID, as you say. People aren't probably moving; they go somewhere lovely, and then they're kind of stuck there, whether they like it or not. So. Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, look, for those watching live, first of all, thanks very much for joining us. Don't forget to give us a like or love, give us a bit of a repayment for sharing some good stuff, dropping, what do you call it, value bombs, I guess I would say, if I were a California-based podcaster. I'll be saying, it's so stoked to have you. It's awesome. I'm going to drop some value bombs on your ass. And we are going to drop some value bombs, but we're going to call them useful insights because we're British and in your case, German, I guess. But we are going to talk today about the whole optimization the conversion piece, which is obviously really important stuff. It kind of sounds so obvious that everyone would be doing it, but I guess they're not, are they? My experience anyway. So we're talking Shopify today as well. For those who follow me, a bit of a shock to the system that we're not just focused on Amazon, but I think the truth is that most Amazon sellers I know are very busy building their own stores as quickly as possible, and many of them are based on Shopify as well. So Klaus, I guess that we'll kick off the formal podcast in a second, but would you say it's fair to say that the principles that apply to a Shopify store owner are going to be true if you're on WooCommerce or any other sort of storefront?
100%, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't really matter what kind of platform you use. Shopify is just one example. You can have WooCommerce, you can go BigCommerce, Magento. The principles of conversion optimization stay the same.
Yeah, makes sense.
Really makes a huge difference.
And I think what's useful, even if you are listening and you only sell on Amazon, I think it's a good idea to bear this stuff in mind because the wider principles that you have to think about once you've got your own store are the sort of things we get to neglect on Amazon, but we shouldn't really, because Amazon's gradually adding more and more options. So we have storefronts and brand advertising and stuff. So I think that bigger picture thinking is helpful, even if you aren't off Amazon yet. Right, well, Klaus, should we kick this off? If you're listening with us live, thanks very much for watching. Do pop any questions. Do let us know where you're listening from as well. I'm always interested in geography. When I'm stuck at home Zoom broadcasting under COVID, it becomes even more important. I can live vicariously via you guys, so let me know where you are in the world. And we're going to kick off the recording now. So here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls. Welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers, and indeed, let's say e-commerce sellers, because today we're getting outside the Amazon bubble. We're welcoming Klaus Lauter to us, who is an e-commerce marketing specialist and specializes really in Shopify, so outside the Amazon bubble. Klaus is an e-commerce veteran with 20 years experience, and he helps Shopify store owners turn visitors into sales. Pretty simple statement there. I like it. So Klaus, warm welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure to have you here as well, man. It makes a nice change to have a European perspective on things. We have lots of Americans on the podcast, and also a nice change to look at things through the sort of direct to consumer or Shopify site. I guess we should say up front that I'm presuming that anything that applies to Shopify store owners will apply to Magento or WooCommerce or the other things. Am I right?
That's 100% right. Yeah. So what applies to Shopify, the conversion optimization guidelines or policies, principles, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter on Magento, BigCommerce, Wix, whatever you use. It's basically you need to apply these principles.
Excellent. Good. So that's one little thing out of the way. Again, if you're an Amazon seller and you're listening, I plead with you to keep listening, because if you're an Amazon seller only now, I can promise you that sooner or later, probably sooner rather than later, you're going to be begging to create your own store for multiple reasons, not least of which is Jeff Bezos' ability to change the goalposts in a huge way at no notice, as those of us who've had our inventory performance index changed and the last couple of weeks at the time of recording will attest. And the other thing to say is that to think slightly bigger, let's go crazy and imagine that you might just learn a thing or two in terms of general principles which can apply to all of your internet marketing, including but not limited to Amazon. So I would plead with you, whatever your selling channel is, listen up to this stuff. Is critical stuff. So let's get into the meat of this. First of all, Klaus, you mentioned you're a 20-year veteran. So tell us a little bit about your background. 20 years is a long time in this game.
Yeah, basically, I was told I'm a dinosaur because 20 years in the online space is probably 200 years in real life. I started in 2001 with my own startup back in Germany, which was a SaaS service. Was running this company for 6-7 years, and then got a offer in Cape Town in South Africa, so I moved there. Over the years, just founded with business partners a couple of other companies, not all of them in the online space, but I was always involved in digital marketing and creating new businesses. And these were either service or product-driven businesses. So yeah, I'm doing this for a very, very long time. As you mentioned, digital nomads. I was traveling for the last 4 years until COVID stopped me as a digital nomad and working basically from 30 odd countries worldwide on my own business, which I have since 2015. And I run my own Shopify store selling products worldwide, and also doing coaching and consultants for other small and medium enterprises.
Yeah, so you're really living the life. We were talking before we started recording for the podcast about the fact that you're in Cyprus, and that's obviously, I was saying that that's a classic place for digital nomad-y type people, whatever the word is. It's such a some strange phrase. What is a digital nomad? I think outside the bubble of digital marketing, everyone probably just thinks that just either silly or doesn't exist. But I guess you're actually living the life, right? I mean, there's quite a few Brits out there that I knew. Are they still out there in large numbers?
Well, I think they will come back once the borders open. Right now, it's relatively quiet still, but Cyprus is about to open everything in about 4 weeks' time. No, actually in 2 weeks' time, because vaccination makes huge progress here. So yeah, the Brits will be back. Obviously, there is some digital nomads here, and definitely one of the spots, as you said, like Bali or whatever, where they mingle. There are certain spots worldwide where you see a lot of what I rather would say location-independent workers.
Yes, that's a better phrase than digital nomad, right? That sounds a bit more acceptable somehow. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, so you're living the life, and you've obviously got a massive background. So with enough credibility, obviously you're extremely competent to tell us what we're doing here. So what are the classic mistakes online store owners make in this arena then? So we're talking about, and we're not just you and me talking about how to turn visitors into sales, but that's your whole focus as a consultant, isn't it? So what are the big mistakes that people make in this arena? Let's start with the big picture first.
Well, it depends where they come from. A lot of my clients are coming from a brick and mortar business, so they have their physical business, and obviously through the COVID, they need to go online. Something they often have just postponed, and now obviously within the last year it became critical, and they are either overwhelmed with the tech part of it, or they are focusing too much on the tech part of it. And the other part is people who are already selling for a while, and they have their first results, and they're either not profitable yet, or just barely break even, and they always think that their main problem is getting more traffic. That's the most common thing, is like, I need more traffic, converting traffic from Facebook, from Google, wherever they pay for, or any other kind of strategy to get more traffic. So that's the main thing. At the end of the day, it is about getting more conversions from the traffic you already have. And that's basically the classic sort of approach, when people approach me, where it starts from. So either overwhelmed or having the focus on the wrong topic.
Yeah, it's funny that actually either which way, I guess the focus is on the wrong thing, and either because you feel like the stuff is pushing on you, all this tech overwhelm, or you're kind of pushing on it. But either which way, you're involved with the wrong thing, right? It's like a dysfunctional relationship, whether they're browbeating you or you're kind of dominating them. It's like it's all in the wrong direction. And I've just got to say that from the Amazon point of view as well, the same thing applies. And this is why any Amazon sellers out there listening, hello, please keep listening. Do not close your mind off and go into the Amazon bubble, please, because this stuff applies to everyone that I've ever met, really. I mean, I think I've never come across a listing or in the Amazon world, it's as narrow as the product detail page, the listing, that can't be improved. I've seen people with 30% conversion rates doing $50,000 or so a month, or certainly per year in some cases. And we've managed to get that up to 40% by just ripping it apart and being rude. When I say we, I mean the 10K Collective Mastermind, collectively led by me, I'm afraid. But there's always room for improvement. And yes, the whole traffic focus. Oh man, if I had $1 for every dollar that everyone had spent on PPC to try and solve problems via Amazon PPC, I'd be a rich man already, yeah, for sure. So let's talk about there's obviously a mindset component here that we're talking about, right? Because people's focus, that's a mindset based word, I suppose, or psychological word. I'm not into woo-woo things, and you're not either. I think we're concrete guys, but nevertheless, there's a psychological errors. So what do you think the psychological principles need to be to approach this work correctly?
Well, if you look on the store itself, a lot of people get just their template, they throw it in as it is, and I think, okay, now they start selling automatically. Now, basically, it's the same applies what would happen in a physical store. You approach a customer and you ask, how can I help you? And then you guide them through whatever you have to offer. And sort of you need to do the same, which is a bit more difficult because it's online, for your Shopify store or your online store in generally. So you have some psychological principles of conversion optimization, and you need to apply these on your whole store, just to make it easier for the visitor, so your hopefully to-be customer, to go and buy from you. That's basically the background.
Yes, what you're saying is that broadly the psychological principles of conversion are fairly consistent from the offline world to the online world. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Interesting. So you find that there isn't, I mean, because obviously you've got a background in a variety of businesses, which I think is really helpful to give perspective. And have you ever been involved in sort of physical retail stores yourself, or have you had customers that do that? Or clients, I should say?
Sort of. My original background is hospitality. So I was working in the hotel business because that's something I grew up in. And that's obviously a service-driven business, where you really help people by communicating with them. So not like a physical store where people come in and just have a look at the stores and browse around, but it's going a step further. And obviously there's a lot of sales principles involved in such kind of communication with a guest in a hotel, in a restaurant as well.
Absolutely.
So I think it's just bring it down to a sort of a human factor and make it easy for a human sort of to digest what you offer.
Yeah, human factor. That's a good word, because I think it's particularly bad amongst Amazon sellers that we get very, very metrics centric. And I'm not saying we shouldn't know our numbers, but well, the wrong metrics, shall we say. They get obsessed with keyword research, but that they don't actually think about what it's like to shop at your store. And I guess on Amazon we kind of can get away with that, but that's also a very bad mentality to perpetuate. But we can't really get away with it as much as we think actually on Amazon. And I guess in Shopify or your own store, we don't get away with it at all, right? So what are the elements then that we need to go through? Let's break those down a bit.
Yeah, let's break them down. So first of all, there's the visual load. That returns pretty much to your design. In a nutshell, is how much strain are you putting on your user visually to understand your pages. So if they come to your store homepage, product detail page, wherever they land first, is it overwhelming? Is there too many things distracting? Or is there a very clear visual overview of what they can do? And this sort of is the boring part, because a lot of sellers that I see or store owners, they try to reinvent the wheel. and trying to be cutesy or fancy or whatever creative when it comes to their structure of the pages. So they move the logo to the left or do other things. And you should really stick to the things that people are used when they go do online shopping. And it would be, just to give you a simple thing, is they expect a logo on the left-hand side and they expect a card icon on the right top-hand side. So, so don't get any kind of creative with that, because only you think that's makes your branding standing out from the rest. Actually, it hurts you. So really keep it sort of easy on the eye.
Interesting. And I guess there's one of the obsessions that Amazon sellers do have, because they're in hyper competitive markets, which I guess is a bit of a different thing from Shopify. It may be hyper competitive to get the click on a Facebook ad, or to get the SEO, God knows, Google SEO, right, for the right terms is competitive. But I guess by the time they get to your page, then differentiation in a really kind of obvious way isn't the key. But also, I guess the point about differentiation is, there's a phrase that my friend Rick Cesari, who was behind a lot of the sort of huge product launches in the 90s, Lean Green, Grilling Machine, GoPro cameras, whatever, and or that late night TV shows where they advertise products at you, which I personally hate as TV, but is very effective. But anyway, he said different is better than good, which is good up to a point. But what you're saying is a very interesting nuance to that, which is different is better than good unless it just defends against obvious expectations, like where a logo should be. And tell me a bit more about that. This comes into the user experience design or user interface design, which isn't something we've ever had to think about if you just sell on Amazon. But what are the sort of basic principle of that, would you say, apart from, logo on the left? Are there any other sort of rules of thumb that we should follow which don't offend expectations?
100%. I mean, obviously, it's all about clarity and simplicity. So you don't want to distract people. You need to have a clear call to action. You want to make sure that call to actions are easy to find. And that brings me to the second point of the principles. That's motor load, and that's about movement. So how much strain are you putting on your user? If they have to use the mouse or the pointer or the keyboard to get something done on the store. For instance, if they need to scroll up a lot down on the page to find a call to action, then obviously that's negative. Or if they only can find certain information hidden behind a tab, that increases the motor load. So they basically need to move around with their mouse or with the keyboard much more, and you want to avoid that. You want to make it very easy to find, and that's one of the key things. For instance, like having call to actions above the fold, very important. A lot of people do not scroll down, and if they have to scroll down, then obviously you're talking about movement, you're talking about motor load, and that's something you really want to limit.
That's such a sort of biological, very physical, ordinary kind of thing to think about motor load. It's very funny to think about. And of course, as soon as you say it, this is always an example of good insight, is as soon as somebody says it, it's obvious. And until they said it, it wasn't even something I'd thought of. I'd never really thought about that. But of course, when I'm scrolling on a phone, I do try and get my Amazon listing creators to say, look, guys, put it on, put your, for example, if you've got photos from your image creators and Photoshop guys, graphic designers, whatever, on, put them on Dropbox on your phone and just scroll like that, really super fast. But I hadn't really related it to physical effort, but I guess that we've become so lazy. But on the other hand, I suppose, to be fair to us as consumers, overwhelmed, right? That's fascinating. And yeah, I'm thinking about my own sites that I've run over the years, various kinds, including Amazing FBA. I realise I'm doing a terrible job on that. And actually, I'm probably therefore not alone in that, even though we think we're doing the right thing. Very interesting.
You should use, or to find out how the load is on your site. Tools like Hotjar or Lucky Orange help you with that. You can go through the recordings, and obviously then you can have a look on how they move with their mouse pointer on your pages. And there might be a certain pattern coming out, which will tell you they're moving far too much. So that's something that helps you a lot in figuring out, is there something you can optimize?
Love this. This reminds me of conversations with my own business partner, who I won't talk about because he haven't got his permission. But again, he's now working for a pretty serious, probably like 9-figure seller, optimizing their pages, and happy as a pig in clover, as the saying goes, because this is the sort of stuff they talk about. But I didn't realize those tools were available. Again, outside the Amazon bubble, suddenly there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to look at. But on the other hand, fascinating insights we gain, which Amazon probably has, to the nth degree, but they don't share them with us as third-party sellers. So this is very interesting stuff. Okay, so we've talked about the sort of visual overload, the motor load, really interesting, subtle but obvious thing as soon as you say it. So what are the other user errors that people make, or things
Next
to
one on
think
the
about?
list would be the cognitive load. So that's about the amount of mental processing required to make sense of your page. So for instance, is the page easy to understand from a intellectual point of view? I can give you an example. If you have a product description which uses overly, I don't know, scientific terms or market-specific terms or whatever, which makes it difficult for the average Joe to understand what you're actually saying, then obviously it doesn't help you selling the product, unless you're selling to a very specific audience that only speaks that or can understand that lingo. Nevertheless, if you're selling, I don't know, any kind of general goods to the broader public, you want to keep this part very, very simple again, and so that the mental processing of what they are reading or what they are seeing in images or videos is as easy as possible. And also there's also tools that help you with that. When it comes to text, for instance, I'm recommending a free tool, which is called the Hemingway app, which is basically the URL. And it gives you a score for the readability. So how easy is that in regards of school grades to understand? And you should, depending on your market, go for a school grade for a fifth or sixth grader. So whenever you write your descriptions, your text descriptions or product descriptions, this will help you to figure out, is that actually understandable? For a lot of sellers, obviously, they don't see the forest because of all the trees, and they speak their own lingo. And it's very important to put yourself in the position of a buyer, a potential buyer from your store. Do they really understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, wow, that's quite sobering because fifth or sixth grade, I just had a quick look because in Britain we have slightly different ways of naming these things, but that means a 9, 10 or 11-year-old. And knowing the average 9-year-old, having taught piano for years, and my wife's still teaching piano, probably next door as we speak on Zoom or maybe in person these days. The average 10-year-old sometimes doesn't know where their left hand or right hand is on the keyboard. Trust me from experience on this. So this is kind of a sobering thing that we probably need to simplify to a much larger degree than we think. And again, I think I'm probably guilty of that. I kind of like long words, and for certain markets, as you say, this might be appropriate, I suppose. But for an average consumer product that isn't supposed to be for a very technical market, this is a very sobering point. Okay, so far we're making lots of exciting mistakes, and obviously we can do the opposite and make it good. So, by the way, Klaus, gotta just say this is so much deeper than I thought it was going to be. Just a few sort of simple online-y kind of hacks. I didn't realize you'd be getting into so much science. This is amazing. I like it. So, what's the next thing on our list to
Well,
get right?
the last one in that regards is the memory load. Memory load is the amount of work users have to perform when recollecting something on your site. Give you an example on that. If you're, for instance, offering coupon codes, discount codes, and you mention them on one page, but they only will be useful on the checkout page. In the case of Shopify, you only can slot your coupon code in there. Then it might be difficult for them to go through or to remember the coupon code and going through the site and then the checkout page. And I was like, oh, where is that coupon code now? So I have to go back. And it brings me sort of to, you want to present the right information in the right moment and not making people think, or in that case, making people remember. And this happened actually quite often, that things are sort of overcomplicated. A lot of stores, for instance, as another example, offer in exchange for an email address to sign up for a newsletter, they offer a discount code. And the usual process there runs like this. I sign up for a newsletter, then obviously you have to follow double opt-in to stay compliant to legal things, and then get the email. They have to confirm the email that they allow to being emailed, and I get a second email, and then they collect the coupon code in that email, and then they have to go back to the website, and then they have to go and choose their product, and then through the cart on the checkout page, and there they can finally then use the coupon code. So there is a lot of steps in between, and they need to sort of remember a lot of things and think about a lot of things. And you want to keep this very, very simple. So that's in a different regards. Make it as easy for a 9-year-old or 11-year-old kid to understand the process. Well, they probably will understand it easier than a 60-year-old.
Yeah, I was going to say, they also have more time or be more determined to do their shopping. I'm just even listening to what you were saying about that coupon code. I was thinking, yeah, that sounds like something I've experienced as a buyer, and the sort of thing that I've seen people set up as a funnel as sellers. And then I was feeling exhausted even just listening to you describe it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't got time to do this. So I absolutely take you. I mean, there's almost like a sort of, not even, you're talking about fine psychological principles, cognitive load, motor load, what is it, visual load, and memory load. Those are really great principles. But for me, there's a kind of rather agricultural version, which is like just kind of overwhelm and exhaustion with the whole business. I mean, I do think that if you've got a certain percentage of people who are either very busy, even though they shop a lot online, or, as you said, those over 60s, which is a bigger percentage of the UK population than under 16s, those guys are just going to give up. So, because I don't know about you, Klaus, but I've been on enough Zoom calls with people over 60 to know that, frankly, they can't find the mute button for 5 minutes. So I don't think they're going to cope, are they?
No, I'm 100% with you. My own store, 7-figure store, running this for 6 years now. My best customer, so my perfect audience, my perfect customer is 60 plus years old. And it was a bit of a learning curve. It took me quite a while. And all of these principles, once they were applied, things became easier because they're easily overwhelmed. And as you said, they do things that you can't even imagine. I mean, we had people saying, I can't check out, and had them on the phone and tried to coach them through our store. And we figured out they were on eBay. So you need to make it very, very easy.
That is absolutely classic. I don't think I've ever heard that kind of story before. They're actually on eBay, but they thought they were checking out of your store. That is completely classic, which is always why you've got to check the most basic details, right? Like that. I think that that reminds me of when I believe that in customer support for computers that they still, as part of their script, they say, okay, have you turned it on? And apparently a substantial percentage of people sort of at that point go, oh, click. And things are solved. I love it. This is a reminder never to assume too much. I mean, lest we be rude about consumers out there, we've all had a similar experience, I think, out online, that we've done something that we thought was just rocket science and the person running it equally thought was obvious. So I guess that's one of those human communication gaps, right? What we think is so obvious in our heads is complete mystery to others. Well, look, these are great principles of psychology. Now we've got another set of principles that you and I had a quick chat about, which is marketing principles, which I guess is more the standard things. By the way, the psychological stuff, I've never heard anyone articulate this stuff. I think that's really cool. Really like it. And I think some of it applies even on an Amazon listing. If you're going to think about the fact that your most important information needs to be before you scroll, that's probably like 2 photos worth, right? So even in that primitive environment where we have very little control, I think that does apply. But let's talk about marketing principles then, maybe more sort of comfort zone. What are the main things we've got to think about that drive the conversion rate?
Yeah, so once you have applied, or basically take a step back and look at the principles and look at your store with the principles in mind, then you go deeper. And one thing that when you start sorting out or cleaning out your store, and for the most stores is basically taking things away. I see most stores that are coming to me in my coaching program, they put every little app, everything that they think will help on their homepage or on their store. And that creates this kind of overwhelm because there's a lot of blinking, moving things. Once in a sudden they think technology or apps help them to sell more, which basically is exactly the opposite. Now, coming from the homepage, one thing that is often missing or not done well is the unique selling proposition and a value proposition. So it's either missing or people do not make it easy enough. Keep in mind that somebody is coming to your store, first-time visitor on your store, either through a Facebook ad or generic traffic whatsoever. You have about 5 seconds to communicate who you are, what you're selling, why they should buy from you, and why they should not buy from your competitors. There is a famous 5-second rule. It works like this. To check out actually on your own store as a tip, take somebody who does not know what you're selling. So they have never seen your website. They don't know what you do. Just take a stranger, pull them in front of your homepage, give them 5 seconds to look at the homepage, and then pull them away and then ask them, it's like, okay, what do we do? What are we selling? What do we offer? And then you will really quickly find out if your unique selling proposition, your value proposition on your homepage is good or not. If they cannot not say what you're doing, then you have work to do. And this is something that's very important. A lot of stores sort of hide it, so it comes too late in the process, and it should be actually the first thing that a visitor on your site sees. So on the homepage, above the fold, right into their face, tell them, and I'll repeat myself here, is what is it, what you're doing, what are you selling, why should they buy from you and not from your competitors?
Yeah, this is great work. I think this is also again that you don't have that sort of general ability to talk about that with your store, with your store as a whole, with your brand as a whole in the Amazon world in the same way. But we do have storefronts, and people do click on those sometimes. So I guess it comes later in the process, in the user journey, if you will, the customer journey, or I guess let's call it the shopper journey. It's not necessarily a customer, unfortunately, as you said. But still, I think the same principle applies, which is when it comes to a particular product, it's even more brutal. You probably got 5 seconds on Amazon. I reckon you got 2, maybe on mobile. I mean, okay, yes, you may argue that you shouldn't be optimizing for mobile because you get better conversions on desktop, but you've got to at least hit both these days. And then, of course, if they hit your storefront, if you're lucky on Amazon, that's kind of down the line. That you still have to pretty much hit them. If they are checking out the storefront, they're probably not bought yet. They're probably hesitating or seeing what else you have. But yes, it's that classic thing of really just being extremely clear. Like everything you're talking about sounds like it's about clarifying and simplifying, not adding, which in a way is good and bad news. I think actually it feels to me relatively easy win. If you've got to add, that feels like an effort from the marketer point of view. So this feels like good news. Well, let's keep going. So it sounds like basically a lack of USP or communicating it too late are the classic things. We've mentioned the word user journey as I suppose naturally come up. Tell me about your thoughts about that within the broader realm of a Shopify or whatever WooCommerce store where you have a lot more control over it, but people are going to click away quicker because you're not Amazon.
No, 100%. So a user journey obviously does not necessarily start, or very seldom actually starts on the homepage. Most of your traffic will probably come in on a product detail page. If you're running ads, obviously you're running them directly to the product or Google Shopping, for instance. But what often happens is that people, especially if they don't know your brand or your business, they want to get a feeling, are you legitimate? A lot of customers are sort of burned at some point because of a lot of China drop shipping stores. So they get very careful once they come on stores that they don't know to really figure out, is that a scam? Is it a real business? And what usually then happens is they go on the homepage or on the About Us page or on the page with testimonials just to see if there's anything that convinces them that you're a real business, a legitimate business and not a scam. And that's where you put your trust building factors in. So you want to have, I don't know, testimonials, reviews, qualifications, awards, a word from the owner, and all of these things on these pages, homepage, About Us page, and obviously on the reviews page, you have your best reviews, just to build up trust with your customer. So they might hop around before they actually decide to buy from you. And again, recordings with Lucky Orange or Hotjar will help you to understand what the average customer does on your store. How do they move through the store? So it's not always a classic funnel on the store. So if you're using tools like ClickFunnels or whatever, or Lead Pages, they take you step by step through the process. On a store, it might be different. Once they decide, obviously, to buy from you and then click the Add to Cart button and then check out, this is then more like structured. But everything that comes before that, they might just jump around and try to either get clarification on things. So a FAQ page, for instance, helps a lot, or just want to know, is this a real business? Can I trust them with my credit card?
Very good point. And I guess that this is something that the sort of, how can I put this? Again, to a degree, on Amazon, it's weirdly a strange sort of, what's the word, sort of two-edged sword, because on the one hand it's chock full of Chinese junk, which has kind of got terrible sort of people saying words like happy time, which is not something any English or American person would say, and it's kind of a bit of a giveaway. And on the other hand, Amazon has incredible brand and trust. Those two statements don't go together very well, which is why Amazon kind of every so often clears things out in a brutal sort of dragnet fashion, right? Because they want to keep that brand trust, but their conversion rates are very high. So I guess we could say numerically there's proof that there's good trust, right? But I guess that once we're off Amazon, you got to build that super big time. And I love the things you're putting in. Again, word from the owners, qualification, rewards. And I like that mental insight, which is so critical, that just because we as marketers get trained to think with blinkers on that everything's a funnel, that the consumers never got told that. So that's not how they actually work. And that totally makes sense. That's exactly how I'd shop if I were looking to somebody. I want to see, who is this person? I might Google their name just to see if there's some bad things, or Google the name of the company, or, you know, scam plus company if I'm really feeling paranoid. And yeah, you're right. There's a whole bunch of hopping around. It's a very sobering thought. So what's the next principle then? So we're talking marketing principles now. We talked USP and value proposition. We've talked about the user journey and exactly the fact that it's not as linear as you might want to think. What else do we need to think about?
Well, in general, when it comes to the user journey or to the purchase journey through your store, it's just keep in mind to offer the right information at the right moment. What you want to avoid is that people leave your store and do either comparison shopping. And so you don't want to give them a chance that there's any questions coming up that they try to find out the answer somewhere else. You should basically answer these questions or concerns, whatever comes up, on the page. Give you an example for the product detail page. So when people are basically looking at the product and deciding, do I want to buy this or not? Obviously, price is one thing, features is another thing, but once they are interested in the product, there's more questions coming up. And then obviously that's where you should provide, for instance, information about shipping times, additional shipping costs, what's the return policy. So you don't want to have this on a different page. You want to have this right on the product page and not really hidden somewhere, right in their face. And if there's any other questions that might come up, with deciding to buying from you, you should address this right on the product page. The more kind of concerns you can address on the product page, the higher is the likelihood that they will go to add to cart and then start buying from you. So no distractions, give the right information in the right moment, and then be consistent in how you communicate and be consistent in the calls to actions, for instance. I see sometimes that people try to be fancy and they use different buttons or colors or font sizes, whatsoever, for their call to action. And that should be basically the same on the whole page. So whenever you have a call to action, it should stand out with, for instance, a different color, and then basically the same on every page up to the moment when they go through the checkout. Especially with Shopify, it's kind of interesting. A lot of stores, even bigger ones, they stick to this principle of having a call to action completely the same everywhere, except the checkout page. On the checkout page, which is sort of standard by Shopify, unless you're on Shopify Plus, one of a sudden it looks different. So they seemingly just forget about that one, and that should not happen.
Yes, I guess there's also sort of inconsistency about branding there that you get with quite a lot of sites, don't you? And I try and avoid that because I've integrated a couple of sites with Amazing FBA, which is not an e-commerce physical products business, but it's the same kind of thing, which is the front is on WordPress, the back end's on Cartera.com as it happens. I'm not suggesting you use that for Shopify substitute, guys. Don't do this at home. But the point is that there's a look and feel that's different, trying to get the fonts the same and the colors. It just feels jarring. It feels like, this is a kind of fake business because the back end looks different to the front, right? That's also something that I find as a shopper disturbing, and I find as a website owner quite hard to overcome. Is that the sort of thing you're referring to, or are there other examples of that?
No, definitely. That's, and as you said, you closer you come to the money. That means you closer you come to the checkout page. The more important is that you stick to being a trustworthy business and make it easy. Even on the checkout page, you can use and you should use trust building factors in there. For instance, using your phone number on the checkout page or your support email address, just to show them there is a way that they can reach you and you're not sort of disappearing into the nirvana. And another thing, for instance, is keep in mind that there is elderly people or people with reading glasses like me. You don't want to use a small font or a font with a low contrast. So all of these things, step by step, work together to get a higher conversion rate. So I always get asked is like, what's the main big thing to increase my conversion? And there is no such thing. It works all together, and everything contributes to having a higher conversion rate at the end of the day. As I said, there's no magic bullet for that, but you need to stick really to the process and put everything in place. And that's something where I help with, because sometimes it's good to have a second pair of eyes looking on your store and just get the store sort of optimized to make it not being overwhelmed to either the store owner, because a lot of the time the store owner is also overwhelmed, not only their visitor, and that doesn't really help.
Two overwhelmed people struggling, and they need a marriage guidance counsellor to come in, really, don't they? So having said the fact that there's no magic bullet, I guess like the closest to a magic bullet probably is, I suppose, a good coach. So you ought to talk about what you offer in a second, but just to summarize really, and just to double check that we've understood it, whilst there no magic bullet, still there seem to be some clear principles which are going to have to work our way through, but there's a clear process. So the psychological principles, the visual load, love that. The motor load, never thought about it, but it makes total sense. The cognitive load, don't make people think too much and keep it for like a 9-year-old. Memory load, I like that. And then the marketing principles, have a USP, use the 5-second test. That's another really, really great brutal test. I like that. And then think about the user journey, keeping it clear, trust building is a big thing, and then clarity really and simplicity. So it feels to me that there are some good, solid, easy to understand principles there, but the devil's in the detail. So obviously you mentioned that having somebody look at your store is really helpful. I know that's one of the things you offer. So just give us a flavor of how you help people if they want to explore more work with you.
What I do is basically I help them building up or putting a framework in place that helps them in optimizing. And that's starting from the basics, as we just spoke through, getting them understanding, and then really going into the nitty-gritty and put everything in place. Usually it starts with a assessment of a store. And then we work our way through. What I offer is a 3-month program where they work with me, either in a group coaching environment or optional in a one-to-one environment where they can talk to me directly. And it's a mix between coaching and consulting from my side and an online course with videos and resources that they can use to work their way through in their own time. And the outcome after 3 months should be higher conversion rates, a much more automated digital marketing strategy. So we're not looking only into the store optimization, we're also looking in email marketing, in that case, and into Klaviyo. And we're looking into data, which people really hate, looking into Google Analytics, which is crucial. and then looking in different marketing channels that might potentially be the best way for their specific business to get more traction. So it's really a program that is built up for people that are already are in the business and just want to optimize without spending more money on ads.
Yeah, that makes sense. And by the way, I'm developing a similar course for Amazon sellers, and I think we're both doing the same thing for a similar reason, which is this: it's simple that if you spend money on optimization for conversion, that okay, it won't last forever, but that's basically going to last for 1, 2, 3 years with tweaks, maybe forever. I mean, psychological principles don't change, I guess, and neither do the basic marketing principles if you really absorb them. Whereas every time you spend on an ad, you get your clicks, you get a conversion, maybe you get a sale, maybe it's profitable, maybe it's not. But then the next time you want ad-driven traffic, you got to pay again, right? Every single time you buy a new product, a physical widget anyway, you got cost of goods sold every single time you sell one. Whereas the beautiful thing about optimization for conversion is it's a one-off cost that basically pays for multiple times. So I think it's the best possible place to spend your money and efforts, folks. So if you are a Shopify store owner listening, and I do actually have a Shopify store owner that working with me because of my import background and product development background as well. But if you're listening, take this seriously. This is the best possible use of your money. Forget about the traffic nonsense and start working with somebody to make you money. So Klaus, if people want to check that out, I've got a redirect here from amazingfba.com/Klaus. That's CLAUS, no E, folks. And I know you're going to offer a 1 hour one-to-one consultation as a bonus for listeners, which is really great because obviously at your rates, that's a very valuable thing. And I hope people can hear that the value that you're going to bring. And the last thing is that you do a free optimization review as well. Tell us a little bit about how that works and how people can get that if they want that.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of quick wins usually on most of the stores. And the 10-minute site review is basically a video review where I will go through your site and recording a video on what I see. And with these quick wins, you usually be able to implement them very, very quickly. And they should give you an uplift in either conversions and or average order value, sometimes even in lifetime customer value. So that's something I offer for free. Obviously, it's not as in-depth as a real site review, which takes much, much longer. And I only will look at the key pages, the homepage, collection, category page, product page, and cart page. But again, a mini site review will give you a quick start into conversion optimization of your own store.
Yeah, that's really handy. And also it's a great way, frankly, if people are thinking of working with you to check out what it is you're going to have to say, and they can get a quick win for free, which is never bad. So in fact, extremely good. So worth checking out. Well, look, Klaus, I know we've got another set of stuff that we're going to cover in a minute. But for now, for those listening to the podcast anyway, I just got to say, listen, really good insights. I like it, and delivered with no BS, no extra fluff, just all the value. Really great stuff. So Klaus, many, many thanks for sharing your wisdom on the show.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Right then, those of you who are listening to the Facebook Live will be wondering what we're talking about. We haven't finished yet. We're still here. And that's because we're recording 2 episodes. As long as, Klaus, you still got some time left to whip through the implementation piece. Great. So we talked about principles in the first one, guys. We're going to be talking about implementing those. It's all very well having principles. We've got to actually get it done, which is when you actually make the money, I guess. So let's talk about this, and I'll reintroduce, and we'll go into our second episode. So those of us listening live, this is what it's like behind the scenes, sneaky insight into how the podcast gets recorded. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers and e-commerce business owners in general, because today we're breaking out of the Amazon bubble and thinking outside of the box there. For us at this podcast, it's radical anyway. I'm sure our visitor thinks that's ridiculous because our visitor has been selling on his own sites for years. So our visitor today, Claus Lauter, who's an e-commerce veteran with 20 years experience, and he helps Shopify store owners turn visitors into sales. Now that's a simple value proposition. I like it. Welcome back, Klaus. Thanks very much for coming back to us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So in the last episode, we talked about some of the principles that we need to cover, basically psychological and marketing principles behind driving, getting visitors to come into sales. And of course, we touched on why that's critical and the fact that, sending a load of traffic somewhere with bad optimization for conversion is basically money down the drain. So today we're going to get into the nitty gritty. How do we actually implement this? Before we get into this, let's deal with this word conversion optimization. It's thrown around a lot. Let's just make sure that we're clear in our definition of that. What do you mean by that?
Well, in a nutshell, it's about simplifying things. So just make it as easy as possible for someone to buy from you. And this implies obviously a lot of little steps that basically show in an overall amount or create an overall amount a higher conversion rate for your business. So it's really about looking into every part of your store, of your website, and deciding if you can make it simpler, if you can make it easier to digest and to use for your customer.
Excellent. I like that a lot. That's a good in a world of complexity. You're looking for creating simplicity. And by the way, it's interesting. There's a book, in fact, just literally sitting next to me. This is where I keep the books that I value the most, by a guy called Richard Koch and Greg Lockwood. In fact, I believe Richard Koch was originally South African, so you may have even crossed paths in literally at the airport. But he is, I don't know, British, South African. I'm not sure which you'd say, and he worked in America a lot. But very interesting that there are two forms of simplification he talks about. One is really simplifying the process of the production, like Ford with his motor cars, and the other one is simplifying the experience for the user, like the Apple iPad, which famously, of course, is a technological nightmare to create in the first place. So I guess what we're doing is creating simplicity for the shoppers. I guess for us as store owners, that creates a lot of complexity. We go, oh my goodness, where do we even start? So that's my first question. Where do we even start with this?
Well, usually where it starts is with a theme. Talking about Shopify and also for other systems like WooCommerce, you're starting with a store theme. Obviously, very, very big stores or brands, they have developed their themes from scratch, which does not necessarily mean that they are better. A lot of starters in e-commerce, they tend to use free themes that they can get from Shopify. And I think there's about 9 or 12 or something like that that you can choose from. And then obviously there's a whole universe there on paid themes. And most of the time, people, first of all, they're overwhelmed by the pure amount of themes they can choose. And the decision is made usually in the first place on something that they find visual appealing. So they choose a theme not necessarily by how good it is for conversion optimization or how much it is optimized for conversions. They just go for, does it fit my industry? Does it fit my niche? Does it fit my color scheme? And so on and so forth. So that's where it starts and where a lot of, unfortunately, wrong decisions are made in the beginning.
Interesting. So I guess it's based on a sort of, I guess to be fair, if you have no criteria by which to make an overwhelming choice, you just go with instinct, which is not a bad starting point. But I suppose, so how would we decide better then? So does it fit my industry, color scheme? Are there any other thoughts about how we would sort of approach that?
In a nutshell, is basically you need to see what kind of product or actually how many products you have. There are certain themes that are working better for a huge selection. So if you're holding a lot of different SKUs on your store, then there's themes that are better for that. And then there's themes that are better for even one product stores. So you really need to look into what do I offer? How many different variants or products do I have? And that might be a good start to look for a theme. The second part is how easy is the theme to configure and to customize. Now, with the cheaper or even with the free themes, you're very limited in what you can do in regards of changing the look and feel from the back end. The more expensive ones have much more options. Sometimes overwhelming the amount of options you can have to configure a theme in the back end, but that might help you to a certain degree on saving on money on software developers. So that's a bit of a decision you need to make. So how much kind of additional work is involved to get it up to your branding. And so is it only a logo that you throw in, or is there a whole color scheme that you need to change, that you want to change? And then how easy or how difficult is that to do directly from the theme, or do you need to have a third party if you don't have a developer in-house to do these changes?
Wow, there's a lot that there's a lot that goes into this. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah. So I guess what that implies, by the way, is we've got to have a branding concept, I suppose, which means, I suppose, what, a color scheme, fonts, that kind of thing that you've decided up front. Is that kind of the starting point before the theme, or would you get the theme and just kind of build from the theme outwards if you're fairly early in the game?
Exactly, yeah. If you're just starting with your business, obviously, then you start from there. If you already have a business, or you're coming from, I don't know, you just had a static website, or your store was in a different platform, but you already have your branding, your brand guidelines, your design guidelines, then you obviously want to look into it as, can that theme support that very easily?
Yeah, so good. Okay, so it depends which way you're starting from, but I guess either which way, whether you're starting from a ready-made template or your own branding decisions, got to fit your industry, and it's got to make sense of competition. I guess those are quite big decisions, right? I mean, I guess we would go down a rabbit hole here. I guess that's why you guys offer some serious coaching, because that does sound quite complex. But I guess, simplicity seems to be your watchword. So I guess that's a starting point. Okay, so after the website theme, which sounds like we're already sweating a bit here, what do we look at next?
Now, if you start with your conversion optimization, you want to start always where it is the closest to the money. It means that's your checkout page. At the checkout page, obviously, people are pulling out their credit card, and you want to make sure that this page is as optimized as possible to take any kind of conversion roadblocks out, that people really are ready to buy from you and go through the checkout process. And then you work your way backwards. So once you have done this, then you go into the cart page, and then you work your way all up to the home page.
So that does make sense as well. And I guess that, I don't know if you can put statistics on it, but do you know roughly how much of an effect optimizing the cart without optimizing everything else has? I mean, it's a bit of a how long's a piece of string question, but if you've got any idea of how to put that.
Well, you will see it in the data after a while. So that's what I usually do in the beginning with my coaching clients. We sort of start collecting the data as a baseline when we start working together. And then over time, we see how and what moves the needle. And as for a checkout page, for instance, if you work your way backwards. In Shopify, for instance, you see your conversion rates, and you see them on different levels. So basically from product page to cart page to checkout page to checkout. And obviously there's always a bit of a drop off in between these steps. But that's something you will see over time if how big the impact is. So it's a bit difficult to say in the beginning. So you just follow the principles and industry standards, and then you will see how big the uplift is. Usually there is some. Also depends on the system you're working on. Shopify, at least if you're not on Shopify Plus, you're sort of limited on what you can do on the checkout page. There's a few things you can do that definitely make a difference. But on other platforms, like in WooCommerce, for instance, you have much more creativity and much more access to how you can tweak and customize your checkout page.
I guess that's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, having too much rope to hang yourself with can be just as bad, can it? So I guess that one of the things that I like about Mac's and Apple's philosophy is that they kind of make it so that your computer can't do really stupid things, because they've made some upfront decisions which may or may not be to your taste. I know that pretty much every developer or serious computer programmer that I know hates that for that reason, and I guess they would feel the same about WooCommerce. But I mean, equally, the fact that Shopify is limited the things we can do might be a relief after the number of decisions we have to make that's come up so far. But I like the fact, so start at where the money is. Once you've got the theme, then start where the money is and work backwards. That's a very sound principle. So I guess sooner or later we're going to work our way backwards to the home page, and I'm imagining that there's a lot of work to be done there. So what are the classic things? Let's start with the mistakes that people make that we need to correct first of all.
Yeah, so first of all, we need to look into what's the purpose of the homepage. And there's basically three things to it, three pillars. First one is obviously communicating, as we already spoke about, the unique selling proposition and your value proposition. Just communicating who you are, what you're selling, why they should buy from you, not your competitors, and so on and so forth. Then the second one is building up trust. Again, we spoke about that by using testimonials, reviews, awards, qualifications, a word from the founder, user-generated content, and so on and so forth. So that's the second part. And the third part, finally, is then taking them into the next step, either to a category or collection page or to a product page. So you need to address these three things on your homepage and then have them in the right order. So on the top, for instance, as the most important part, you would have your unique selling proposition. Below that, you would have a block of trust building elements. And then below that, you finally take them a step deeper into the customer journey.
That feels very doable. I mean, I guess that compared to the other stuff we've been talking about, that feels kind of quite logical and well, I guess it's clearer and simpler. I guess that the thing about the theme that I'm still grappling with is the number of choices to sound infinite, and that sort of what do they say? The confused mind does nothing, and I guess that sounds very confusing. Whereas this sounds like it's easy to mess it up, but now you've clarified, it does sound to me like a very doable thing, and I guess the homepage also is a kind of is less mysterious to us, I suppose, isn't it? Because it's a kind of the shop window, and I suppose there is something about that that's more reassuring.
Yeah, there is an issue to it, and you will see that if you're visiting stores, you will have that all over the time. And just next time you go to online shopping, have a look at it, especially on the homepage. Most of them are plastered with additional apps. So they have a FOMO, a fear of missing out app sliding in. They have a chat icon popping in. Then they have an exit intent window popping in, or a time released pop-up popping in. So a lot of people just throw a lot of things on the homepage. And then before you actually can see something, you have to click on three things. And sometimes I see that people have like two pop-ups overlaying before you can actually read what is on the homepage. And it's a very common problem. People just try to use every app that give them the slightest idea of I keep my customer here. One thing that I see, and pretty much a lot of stores have that, is a pop-up that comes up before you have seen anything, before you have read the unique selling proposition, before you know what that store is about. There's a pop-up giving you 10% discount. So I don't even know what you're selling, and you're already giving me 10% off. Now, two things happen in there. It's annoying that I have to click this away. Probably I'm not willing to give you my email address at this point because I don't know what you're selling and what you're about. And thirdly, you're devaluing your products right from the scratch. So you're giving me 10% on something that I don't know what it is, but apparently you don't have trust in your products because you're selling them cheaper. So there's a lot of things, and it's mainly about taking things away and reordering than recreating.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I'm just thinking about some of the stuff, my worst moments on my own websites. I've definitely been guilty of this, and to some extent, I maybe still am. But I think that the closest Amazon sellers can get to this, again, Amazon restricts our abilities to change things for a very good reason, because they optimize for conversion like crazy, and they know what they're doing. They're geniuses at it. Whereas if you give an average Amazon seller the chance, they'll just basically lie down in front of people and beg them and give them 50% discounts. So I really like the fact that there's a time and a place for that. And the time, I guess, to give a discount is presumably when somebody's shown that they're interested, but there's some kind of resistance. I'm guessing that not hello, have a discount, which would be a weird conversation in a shop, wouldn't it? When you think about it, as you said the other episode, if you think about a physical shop, if I walked into a shop and somebody said, "Hi, do you want a 10% discount on our shoes?" I might be rather amazed. So,
well, I mean, it's a sales tactic. I mean, I've spent a fair amount of time in strange countries, and I lived obviously in South Africa for a long time. And one thing that happens there is street sellers yell at you, is like, "I make you a better price." You don't even know what the original price is. So they say, "I make you a better price." So that's basically leading with a discount. And there is a place for a discount to get them over the hurdle if they not going there, and there are strategies to do so, but you shouldn't lead with that on the homepage until you're a $1 store or something like that. But obviously, if you want to build a brand and you have quality products, that's not the way to go.
I love that. That's really a classic. I was going to say, I think of street vendors as being pretty street smart, i.e. they live and die by what they do, each day, and therefore they'd be pretty savvy business people in a certain kind of street sort of way. But I'll make you a better price is not the greatest pitch when you have no idea what the original price was. That's very funny. And yet, how many of us are doing that? It's a very good point. And by the way, Amazon sellers listening, you're probably guilty of this. Guess what? All those discount codes you're sending out. If people have no idea what it is and why they should buy it, then why would they be interested in a discount? I'm just saying. So what are the other typical optimization areas? I mean, everyone talks about, testing and data and stuff. I mean, is this something we can sort of test our way out of, or what do you think is the right way to approach all this stuff?
Well, the testing comes after you have done your initial optimization run. So you go basically and follow all the tips and tricks and strategies I give you to optimize your store. And then the testing starts, the A/B testing starts, and that never really stops. There's always things you can test out. For that, you will need data, and you would need tools that help you in making the right decision, what's working and what's not. So you have your optimized store, and then you decide, for instance, to check out if a continuous scrolling category page works better than a category page where you have a next page or a pagination on there. And then you always go and just check or test one of these cases at a time. Big problem is that people try to change and test a lot of things at the same time, and then they don't know really which one is working or not. So it's a two-step process. First, optimize the whole store from A to Z, and then you start with A/B testing to further optimize over time.
I'm into that. I mean, in the Amazon world, again, it's much more primitive, so you don't have to be, you haven't got so many things, anything like the number of things that you could change. But I still, whatever levers are available, especially in the early days, you see people changing the price and the PPC spend and the photography at the same time, and I'm always just forbid my clients from doing that now. Like, for example, there's a guy I'm working with later, he's doing about, I don't know, $10,000 a month, early stages, and I said to him, right, you can change the price, or you can change the PPC spend this week. What do you want to change? Because we want to get some data. We're not even using split testing tool. We could, but even so, the number of data points we're getting on is going to give pretty dodgy statistics even after a week, but after a day it would be just ludicrous. So I'm totally with you on that. One thing at a time. It's like a plea on bended knee for me, to most people most of the time. And sometimes people you should know better, right? I don't know if you've seen that, but even people doing seven figures, if they have a really terrible things happening in their business, they start pulling all the levers at once. Have you seen that sort of phenomenon, or is it just me?
No, I'm a victim of that myself. I mean, you start going into panic mode, and I say, oh, okay, I don't know what it was, so I rewrote everything I ever did, and then you pull out the bad and the good things, and you really should rely on the data. And again, with the data, if you're doing A/B testing, you need to reach a statistical significance. So that you need to have enough data to make a educated decision on that. So just doing a change on your website and then let it run for 3 days and have, 100 visitors, and then making already a decision, that might be far too early. So you want to have at least, 1,000 transactions on that, so that you really know what's happening. And that obviously takes some patience, which obviously as entrepreneurs, we're not the most patient people on the planet. And just to sit there and to see, is it working or not, and not pulling the plug too early.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's when entrepreneurship, as you've already just hinted, it implies a weird mixture of personal characteristics. But I think you have to have impatience, but it's kind of hurry up slowly is the best phrase that I've heard that sums it up. So in other words, you want to be impatient for the result, but you've got to have the courage to do one thing for long enough to know what the result's going to be. And I just think it's a bit like sort of riding a ship through a sort of stormy seas. If you keep kind of twisting the wheel and going left, right, and whatever, I think you're going to capsize. I don't really know enough about sailing, so this is a dangerous metaphor, but you get the idea. I think that I see that a lot, that we all fall victims to that sometimes. And I think just basically panic can come upon all of us, and I guess what we're both saying is just don't panic and change one thing at a time. So we talked about individual pages, and the sort of overall theme of the site is the only sort of site-wide thing. When it comes to the site as a whole, what are the other sort of typical things that we need to look out for that hurt or indeed help optimization for conversions?
Well, one thing that helps you a lot with optimization is asking your customers, your existing customers. So doing surveys, sending out questionnaires, or even getting external services that have people going through your site, and basically then they will be recorded, and you will see how people are actually working with your site, especially with questionnaires. And that will help you immensely to understand what people are looking for in your store and where they are struggling with. So in this point, or in this regards, your customers is really the best friend, because they came as a first time visitor to your website, and then something made them decide to buy from you. And you want to know exactly what was it that made you buy from us? Was it the product? Was it, I don't know, the brand? Were very specific things. And people are usually very helpful in that. I know from people who are actually calling their customers and going through them and taking them through the site again. So it's more than just having a technology part of it, doing the work. It's really talking to your customer and asking them is like, okay, what can we make better? Where are you struggling on your site? And you might just pull someone from the street, pull them in front of a computer, and then ask them, is like, buy something from this store, and then you just watch them. And that helps tremendously. It's obviously depends on how far you want to go as a business owner, but this exercise will help you to understand what's wrong with your store, with your message, with your products, and so on.
I like that a lot. I mean, I think talking to people is really helpful. Now, again, trying to sort of bring a bit of a sort of Amazon flavor to it, as it were. Obviously, by the way, you could do this in the past, because you could literally get people's phone numbers and phone them, because I did this because some guy on a podcast told me to. So in 2015, I literally phoned some random people in America who were a bit surprised, but they did speak to me. So that is now not something you can do, and it would probably get you thrown off the platform. But what you can do, if you've got any kind of email contact with people, is ask them why they bought. And the classic way of doing that on Amazon, which is now a little bit hard to do, was to ask them if they were in America, 2-day shipping. Ask them why they bought before they received the product. Then they're not influenced by the product, which is an interesting one. But also in modern Amazon, as it were, in 2021 and beyond, this is an excellent reason why, even if your transactions happen in Amazon, and even if all the inventory is stored with Amazon, all the rest of it, that we want to be able to access customers or even shoppers outside of Amazon because of this kind of conversation, because I think this is so powerful. And this is one of the reasons why as Amazon sellers, people get into weird habits, because Amazon has so much control over our communication with the customers that we never get to speak to them, literally speak. The other thing I just want to say is what you just said is grabbing a person and just getting them to shop on your site and observing them. Any of us could do that, even if you sell on Amazon as well. And I think that's a really excellent idea. And I don't know anyone who actually does this. I think this is one of those sort of extremely untechnical hacks, which takes some effort and some courage. But nobody's doing it. I've never heard anyone talk about it. So I think that could be a real win. Is that something you've literally ever done yourself, Klaus? Do you ever something, not literally off the street probably, but you've got users in to shop in front of you?
I have done this on my own store. My own store is in a bit of a, at least from the viewpoint of a European, in a bit of a very specific niche. And so people do not necessarily understand in the first place what it is about. And I took people just from my wider friends and just say, listen, there's my store. Have a go at it. Let me know what the store is about, and just buy something. And then we're just watching them, and that's really, really helpful. That's really helpful. It's not necessary. I mean, you need to keep that in mind. If you have a specific audience, the person that you pull in front of the computer might not be your perfect customer in regards of the industry. So that might be a bit of a risk. So the closer you can come to your perfect customer and putting them in front of the screen, the better it is.
Yeah, that's true. But nevertheless, I was just thinking, if you've got somebody who's roughly the right kind of, the right well, I guess gender probably doesn't make so much difference. If they're the right age, I think age might do, or generation, or I suppose other things like education level, so the bigger demographic picture, shall we say. I'd imagine that if your store's super hard to use, everybody will find it hard. So I guess it will find the bigger problems anyway, right? And then the more subtle variations, you might want to bring somebody in. But I really like that. You know what, the older I get, as it were, in the Amazon world, I've only been selling on Amazon for like about 7 years now. So I guess that's kind of in internet years, quite a long time, right? But it's not that long in the real world. But I just feel like I trust solutions that are the most primitive, the lowest tech, and the least specific to a platform now. The more Amazon-specific metric is, the more suspicious I am of it. So I love things like, profit margins, because they apply to all businesses and a gross profit, pre-tax profit, whatever it is. But this is really great. I like this. Very nice and low tech. So there are last couple of areas that I just want to talk about fairly briefly, because this is like how long is a piece of string. But obviously, images are famously incredibly important with fast-moving consumer goods sales. They're important for any kind of marketing these days, but especially in this area. So how do we even begin to sort of start optimizing our images for conversion?
Well, there's a technical part, and again, there is a usability part. Obviously, for the technical part, you need to resize them. And I usually, for a Shopify store, I would recommend something like 800 by 800 pixel, and then compress them. There's a couple of tools out there that you can use, like tinypng.com, and compress the images so that they load fast. Then you want to use a carousel, obviously. And again, there's a lot of different variations in different themes. And again, keep it simple. So have your main image of your product loading. Best case scenario, your product with a white background. I think this applies to what you do on Amazon as well. And then have at least 4 or 5 different images of the product from different angles, of the product in the hands of a customer. So basically the product on a person, if that is possible, to give the shopper an idea how big the product is. And you can add also videos, obviously very helpful on this one. And I go as far as having a customer testimonial in the image carousel. Normally for a testimonial, people would need to scroll down on the product detail page to see the testimonials, reviews. And having it very high on the page, and that's the image carousel, might help you already. And then obviously, if you have a size chart or you need, I don't know, nutritional facts or something like that, you want to have this in the image carousel as well. So it's not only about the product, showing the product, it's also about additional information that you can access very, very quickly through a image carousel.
Yeah,
you don't
this
want
is
to have
great.
too many images.
Yeah, this is good. And by the way, a lot of this stuff applies extremely directly to Amazon, because we're talking about product detail pages now. So this is like comfort zone for me. And the technical part, I mean, the sizing is slightly different on Amazon. But I mean, certainly, I guess once you got your own site, you've really, really got to think about page load speed, right? Whereas Amazon kind of takes care of that. Again, 4 or 5 images of the product from angles. I mean, on Amazon, we're normally limited to 9. So if you've got 9, it varies. Some are 10, some are 7. Like, please, folks, I'm begging you on bended knee again. Please use all of them. Why would you not increase the possibility of people buying your stuff? And again, using video, I think it's a bit underused because people get scared about this. But again, this is probably pretty similar between Shopify and Amazon, and you got more leeway on your own site, I guess, but even more reason to convince people because you don't have Amazon's trust and brand. That a lot of people just can put videos together from putting together still photographs and put some music behind, and it's fine. And it's certainly, as long as the quality of the image work is good, a pretty acceptable video these days. And I think a lot of people shy away from it because they're worried and they think they've got to pay somebody $1,000 or €1,000 or whatever to do a massive professional photo shoot. I mean, what's your view and experience on that sort of video creation side?
No, I don't think, unless you're a huge brand like Nike or Adidas, you need to invest thousands of dollars to create a product video. As you said, it's also about building trust, and better having a video that is done is homemade but still good enough, and you can do that with your phone nowadays. I mean, if you have a good phone, it has a good camera, and with a bit of good lighting, you should be able to show your product. And definitely better than not having a video. And a video just connects much better to the product and even to the customer. If the person who shows the product, for instance, is sort of within your audience, then a video definitely helps. I have one supplier for my own store. They're making relatively easy videos for the products, and they work very, very well. The advantage there, obviously, is you can use the video not only for your product page, but you can use the video also in other parts of your marketing.
Yeah, it's very smart. And again, you know, if you're selling stuff on Amazon, you can now use it in not one but two places. First one, the product listing itself, which will really drive the conversion rate, which is what we're discussing here, and indeed your entire focus, I know, as a consultant class. The second thing is you can obviously repurpose that video, which I have done for clients, and it works very well. Slightly different rules on Amazon, but same difference, as part of your advertising efforts, which strictly speaking, of course, then becomes part of the traffic work. But the point is you get two birds with one stone, as we say in Britain. Kill two birds with one stone. It's a rather violent metaphor now I think about it, but that's what we say. And that's just a starting point. And obviously if you go out and you drive some traffic with Facebook ads or whatever, you've got it for that purpose again, right? So I think there's a lot of wins that come from effectively a little sort of animated carousel. Unless we forget, folks, if you've got an iPhone, the iPhone will automatically create this sort of collection for you with appropriate music. At least they think it's appropriate. I think it's cheesy nonsense, but it's the technology is so advanced now that the phones are creating this stuff for us. I mean, it's not going to be rocket science to put it together. So yeah, I'm just saying that because I see a lot of people who don't use video who could. So just sort of banging the drum for video. And tell me about this, Klaus, because this is interesting to me as somebody who doesn't run a Shopify store, never have. But when it comes to a product detail page on Amazon, a lot of people copy that on white background thing. And of course, if you're on Amazon and you're search term driven, sort of generic search term, not a branded term, and you come onto a product detail page, we only really have one page on which to connect people with the product. So I'm always begging people to put more context in place, lifestyle photos and stuff. Obviously in the Shopify store that's very, very different. How does that work by the time the user's made it to a product page? Is the on white background actually a better option in that context, or is it also important to put some lifestyle shots in and show the product in use?
Yes, both. So you should have the product on a white background or on a transparent background. Definitely in high resolution, so that's should be easy to see. One tip there, a lot of stores are using the zoom feature. So basically you can zoom into the product image, and most of the time it's not really necessary. If you have a high resolution photo or a good quality photo, you don't need that. The downside of a zoom feature, for instance, it adds to the load time. There's more JavaScript to load in the background, and you rather have detailed photos with certain features of the product instead of having this zoom functionality, which can be very annoying depending on what device you are. And the lifestyle photos, obviously, yes. What you need to decide on is, do you want to lead with the product photo or do you want to lead with the lifestyle scenario? That depends obviously on your audience and where do you want to sell. So that's a decision that you really need to test out. What's the first photo on the slideshow or on the carousel they see from you? Something to test.
That makes sense to me, and I think also I can imagine a couple of scenarios where even in an Amazon universe, well, we don't get to control it in Amazon. The first product photo is always on white, but the extent to which you then focus on lifestyle versus product detail, I would say, I mean, the two classic thoughts for me would be a very technical product, whereas a very lifestyle driven product, which is about being out in the sunshine and enjoying, you know, we have a bit of sun here, amazingly. So British people like the sun, they just don't get much of it here, which is why they're all over to Cyprus to join you there, Klaus. But he's probably speaking loudly in English and drinking too much beer, but I digress. But or are you selling a very technical product to, say, a German audience, which even on Amazon, I would just really focus on features and technical because that's the sort of buyer. And I guess those are the sorts of nuances, right? So we talked about the images. I guess the last piece we should touch on briefly before I let you get back to the sunshine in Cyprus there is the copy or the words we use. I mean, first question, does it even really matter? I guess we all assume that everything's so visually driven. Do the words really matter these days?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. You have different people are digesting information different ways. So you have people who are more driven by images or by videos, and then you have people who really read every single word. And something you can see if you use your testing tools, Hotjar, Lucky Orange, or whatever, how much time do they spend on different parts of your page. And obviously, you want to serve each of these different groups with the right information. And copy or text is definitely very, very important. Two reasons there. First of all, and that's a technical reason, it helps you with SEO. So you need to keep that in mind. If you have something on the long run, you want to rank on search engines, Google, etc., then it helps you definitely to have text there. Secondly, it helps you to communicate the benefits, and that's where you should lead with, always the benefits. I see a lot of stores that just throw in the features of the product and then they leave it like that, and that's it. So take it or leave it. And so you should always lead with the benefits, with good copywriting, and then slowly make your way down, mentioning the features and mentioning the return policy and shipping policy and all of these things. The main decision you need to make is basically, do you want to work with short copy? That means something that is below 500 words or so. Or do you want to have a long form product page? Ezra Firestone, for instance, you might have heard of him. It's a big seller in the Shopify environment. He uses a lot of what he calls left-right long-form copy, where he basically has a lot of text in there. He breaks it up with images, with videos partly, and it makes the whole experience, I wouldn't say more entertaining, but definitely more informative when it comes to the product. And he's selling cosmetics, which are not necessarily highly technical products where you need a lot of text, but he uses that, and for good reason. So definitely invest in good copywriting. If you can't do it yourself, find yourself a copywriter. And don't stop on copywriting on the homepage or on the About Us page. Really look in every single product page. And it might be a bit of a pain in the neck to do so, but the more you invest in these pages, the better it is. And I can give you an example. My best-selling product in my store, which I'm running for a couple of years now, I invested at some point a couple of $1,000 for the copy of that specific product page. And it might sound a lot for the product description of one page, but it has paid out many times over what I have invested.
Sorry, just finding the mute button here. Yeah, that's quite striking. $2,000 just for the words. I mean, that does feel really hard to sell. If you had a board of directors to sell it to you, I think that would be a difficult discussion. And yet, you've had a massive return on investment. So that's very, very striking. The words definitely, obviously, still do matter. I can say, for example, that in the Amazon world, even though it feels like the words really don't matter, they do, because I know that one of the guys in the mastermind a while ago had a very good professional copywriter they were employing, and he got them to rewrite. They didn't even change the keywords they were targeting, so it didn't change the sort of SEO, as it were, the Amazon SEO. But the conversion rate went up just by changing the bullets. They didn't change the title, they didn't change the price, they didn't change the images, the stuff that I would personally expect to move the needle, which blew my mind. It actually measurably increased the conversion rate of several percent, which just made me revise my opinion that nobody reads the bullets, that this is not true. Maybe not that many people, but as you said, and it's a great corrective to my way of thinking, is drifting, even though I'm a very words-based person, as you could tell, drifting in the way of thinking words don't matter, that you're absolutely right. I mean, it definitely isn't true. And I love Ezra Firestone's approach. I mean, Ezra Firestone's one of the people that he's a kind of guru type who I really find very engaging. I mean, for once, one thing he did, which is not strictly an e-commerce example, but was very striking, is that I once saw a YouTube ad of his, and it was just him talking like a podcast. He didn't have any call to action, which must be a historic event. I've never seen in a YouTube advert without a call to action. And it was about 20 minutes long. And the striking thing is, I watched all of it because it was really engaging. How amazing is that? So that level of engagement, I think, is pretty special. So That's like the extreme end of where you could go with it, right? But your $2,000 invested in with a return is a pretty striking story. One little last area that we ought to touch on. You've mentioned apps a few times and that people can misuse them. So tell us a little bit about good and bad use of apps in the Shopify universe.
First of all, you should only use the apps that you really need. People tend to throw too many apps into their store because they can, and they're cheap, depending on which one they use. And then they either not really using all the features of it, or there is just too many features that are used. So both extremes happen. And the more apps you have, the slower your store will load. So that brings us back to load times and speed of your store. And it adds up over time, obviously, at the end with Shopify on your monthly bills, even if a single app is only like $10 or $12 or whatever per month. So really limit it on the ads that you really need. One tip there is, this is a very specific Shopify tip there. If you're testing apps, always make a backup of your theme, then install the app, see if you like it, if you use it, if not, deinstall it, and then take the backup and put that back into your store. That will prevent your theme by clustering with leftover code and blow up your whole code. So that's just to keep your theme clean and fast. So apps, again, have a look on what you really need. Normally, you don't need that many apps. A lot of themes that are coming already with a lot of features and functionality, so you don't need to have apps. But other than that, just keep it to the bare minimum.
There's a theme emerging here, which is less is more, really, isn't it? That the simplicity and clarity, I guess, has to apply to the consumer experience. But in the end, it's sort of, I guess it has to, at some level, apply technically, because otherwise it just becomes an unwieldy mess. Either something's going to break, or which is the worst case, or less dramatic, but probably terrible for conversion rate. I guess the load time increases, right? I understand there's lots of statistics about how quickly people give up on a site when the load time's over like 1.5 seconds or something. So yes, that's obviously one of those things that, again, as Amazon says, we have the luxury of not thinking about, I guess. But yeah, I can certainly say also that if you're on WordPress, which I know some people do, and I know Shopify store owners really frown on this, but I know other people who are equally passionate about selling, setting up serious e-commerce stores on WordPress. So I'm not going to get into that fight. But what I would say is, as a WordPress owner myself, always back it up before you install a plugin, which is very similar sort of to what you're saying. It's not quite the same, because I guess the code stays clean afterwards. I just don't know. But yes, it's the old principle that one app can crash your site, so don't risk it, especially if you've got a live site with e-commerce functionality. So look, lots and lots of things that you take us through today. I mean, Klaus, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Didn't quite intend to take so much of your time, but there's just tons of value for people to take away. I mean, like a free masterclass for sure. So that's amazing stuff. I'm really grateful. Tell us a little bit about people. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into this. If people want to work more intensely with you, or tentatively, I should say, how do they go about it? What do you offer?
Just hit me up. I offer a training course, an implementation course, and one-to-one consulting and coaching. So basically, I take my customers from A to Z with a framework to implement all the conversion optimization, marketing automation, looking into data, and so on and so forth. Two options there. You can either work with me in a group environment or in a one-to-one environment. And that would be 3 months where you work very, very closely with me. And this includes coaching calls. You get access for 12 months to the course content, which then includes videos and other resources. So if that's something you're interested in, then just hit me up and I'll get you all the details.
Amazing. Thank you, Klaus. And then also, I know that you offer, we ought to give the URL for that. So if you want to go to that, folks, amazingfba.com/Klaus, CLAUS, no E, CLAUS for sugar. And I know you also offer a little review of people's sites as well. Tell us what people can get there.
Yeah, so what I offer for free is a 10-minute mini site conversion review where I basically do a video audit of your store and then just go through the main pages like the home page, collection page, product page, and cart page, and see if there's any quick wins that either increase your conversion or even your average order value. And that will give you a quick start into conversion optimization and might give you a first step into this whole process of optimizing your store for higher conversions.
Amazing. Well, look, Klaus, you've been extraordinarily generous with your time as ever. And really great expertise and put across in really absorbable bite-sized chunks. And that's a great sign for anyone who's wanting to work more intensively with you of what they can expect. Because, you and I've spoken quite a lot over the last while, and that's definitely been my consistent experience of you. There's a lot of absorbable wisdom, which is fantastic. So, look, I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
Great. Well, peoples of Facebook, we're going to end the broadcast there. Don't see any questions that need answering. I'm not surprised because I think Klaus has answered any question that anyone could come up with without actually literally, going and working with him one-to-one. But thank you very, very much for listening. Do not forget, if you're listening to this, even though it's not live, to give it a like, love. Do put any comments in there, and we'll certainly either Klaus can answer it, or I'll hit him up and we can get some answers for you. So do put any comments or questions you've got for Klaus at the bottom as well. And thank you very, very much for listening. And Klaus, thank you so much for doing a Facebook Live with us today.
Sure, of course.